Working? I think so. Do you see recording on yours?
Yep.
Good.
Yeah, I do.
Hello, Servus, grüß euch. Welcome back to the podcast, He Has a Bird. I am your host, Sean Shelton. We are here, or I'm here with my father for game 2 of the AFL team name Rumble. This week, we have the Vikings versus the Steel Sharks. And this is going to get very, very interesting. It's not going to be as clear cut as not only in outcome, but in definition as the Steel Shark, or excuse me, as the Rangers and the Giants. Because what the fuck is a Steel Shark? But we'll get into that later. For people who didn't hear the first episode, what we're doing is we're taking the team names of all the AFL teams and having them hypothetically battle each other on 11 versus 11 premise. And why I have my father here is there's no better person to talk about the team names or the mascots of the AFL teams, because over the past 5 seasons, for every single Raiders game, so 80 plus, 90 plus games, he has sent a motivational message weekly before the game, oftentimes incorporating the opposing mascot or team name. For an example of that, another example like last week's, this was a message I got about previous to our game against the Vienna Vikings in Vienna last year. So it's not always about the team names, but oftentimes it is. This one is actually about history of the city. And the message reads, 336 years ago, an alliance of Christian armies led by General Jan Sobieski, the King of Poland, defeated the Ottoman army and liberated the city of Vienna. At the last possible moment, just before Vienna fell, Jan Sobieski arrived at Kahlenberg, a hill north of the city. Even though Berg they call it a mountain, but it's not a mountain. It's a hill. So Kahlen Hill, I don't know what hill is in German. They didn't cover that in B1. He was leading a force of 40,000 Poles. The battle began soon afterwards in the early morning hours of September 12th. The King of Poland, with a fearsome winged hussars, along with 20,000 men, led a cavalry charge down the hill into the right flank of the Ottoman army. The hussars were one of the most formidable fighting forces of the time. With the sound of the wind through the feathers of their artificial wings was said to unnerve the enemy horses and drive superstitious soldiers into panic. The battle was over in 3 hours. The siege was broke and the city was saved. Jan III Sobieski was received as the hero of Vienna. Unfortunately, for the Vienna Vikings, history rarely repeats itself. Today, the field general Jean Christopher Shelton I has arrived at Hoyavata, a hill north of the city, leading a force of Tyrolean raiders. The quarterback, with the fearsome, massive offensive line, along with the offense, will lead a charge down the hill right into the heart of the Vikings defense. The Raiders' offensive line is one of the most formidable in all of Europe, and the sight of Michael Habertin dancing has said to unnerve enemy coaches and drive their defensive linemen into panic. Today's battle will also be over 3 hours. However, the siege will not be broken, and the city will not be saved. The siege will continue on to the ECTC Super Final and the Austrian Bowl, and Sean Christopher Shelton I most definitely will not be received as the hero of Vienna. I think that's safe to say. That was a pretty good one, Pops. You're proud of that one too, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm proud of that one. That was one of my better ones. And I really like history. I've always loved it. And I got to tell you, you playing and living in Europe has really broadened my historical horizons, and coming over and being able to see you. I never even traveled to Europe before you started playing over there.
Well,
so, a lot of history.
True. Well, the backstory behind that message, that motivational message, is after the 2018 Austrian Bowl, we spent a couple of days in Vienna and we toured around and we went to Schönbrunn. and you learned all about the Habsburgs and got you interested into Viennese history and came along that story. And we
Yeah.
actually went on top of
Yeah.
Kallenberg, and you heard the story. And I think they have a monument of
Have
the.
a church that
Yep.
they built for one Sobieski.
So he incorporated what he learned in our trip to Vienna into a motivational
Yeah.
message
Yeah.
against the Viennese, against the Vikings.
Yeah. And I love
Bullet,
the Vikings.
hey,
Love them.
they're good for Austrian football.
Yeah.
Uh, I haven't told you that. I was giving Chris a little bit of a hard time in our national team meeting. Chris is the national team defensive coordinator. I'm the national team quarterback coach. And we were talking about special teams, and we were talking about how we should work on quarterbacks pooch punting into defensive backs because it's a very effective play. And he just shook his head like, nothing but fun. It's always good to have other good football teams in Austria or in Europe. We
Absolutely.
need more.
Good competition is always
We
good.
need more. But today, the Raiders are not going against the Vikings. The Steel Sharks are going against the Vikings. So let's start there. Dad, what the hell is a steel shark?
That's a really good question. I guess my research came. How did that name even come about? And I guess there were the combination of two teams. There were the Steelers,
as far as I
and
understand,
then the Sharks. Yeah, the Sharks, and then they became the Steel Sharks. And when you try to do research on Steel Sharks, the only thing that comes up is there was a really bad movie made several years ago called The Steel Sharks, kind of a B movie. With like Gary Busey in it, and not a great movie about submarines. Like steel sharks were actually submarines, but so that's always been a tough one. Like some of the teams you've played are easier, even though like the Vikings have become very tough because like last year you played them 4 times, so it gets tougher and tougher. But the Steel Sharks, I guess you got to go with, hey, it's a shark. Right. And generally when you think of shark, you think of the apex predator, the top shark, the biggest shark, the great white.
Yeah.
And I guess with steel skin. Right. And then, you look at, sharks have always been thought to not be very intelligent and be, kind of depicted as just pure eating machines. But I think research recently has kind of indicated that maybe that's not really accurate, and maybe they are a little more intelligent than we've given them credit for, and they even are social. But in really, when you think about a shark, it's just really a big eating machine that never stops. Constantly swimming, constantly looking for food, constantly eating. Trying to and then you even run into sharks like the tiger shark, which they call the garbage man of the sea because he eats everything. It just whatever it bumps into, it eats. So big, strong, fast eating machines.
Okay, so
really sharks.
So it doesn't the mascot name or the team name is pretty vague in general. And then just like we did with the Rangers, we're going to check out the logo and see. And actually it looks just like a white shark, and it's relatively large in size. So it looks like they're depicting a great white like you talked about. So I think that's what we'll go with. We'll go with a great white shark that has steel skin. Now, I think a lot of people know the common characteristics of a gray white, but is there anything that changes because of its steel being skinned? Because some characteristics of steel is it's a very, very strong metal, but it's also very, very heavy. And gray whites also are known to be very, very quick swimmers. I read something where they can get up to 24 kilometers per hour in a straight line. But
wow, somebody's been doing his research.
Not a lot going on. So with steel skin, which is going to be immensely more heavy than a normal skin of a shark, would that impact them in any way?
I mean, it's got to slow them down.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you're adding a lot of weight onto the shark. I think it would have to battle just to remain buoyant. To be able to to maneuver, but it has to slow them down. Having a steel skin, would really take away a lot of the speed element from the
Right.
great white.
It's almost like a knight wearing a full suit of armor. Like you're going to
Yeah.
have that added protection, but it will
Right.
slow you down. So
Right.
I think that's an accurate or our best depiction of what we can do with this steel shark, because they don't exist. On the other hand, the Vikings, they currently don't exist in the way that you know them, but they were very real, and were very impactful on history throughout the world. Throughout the world, they were they, after reading, I had no idea how immense their travel and their influence was. What can you tell us about the Vikings?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the Vikings, were, they get kind of depicted. I think, uh, probably not the best way, right?
Almost
The
savages, right? Like unintelligent
savages,
savages.
right?
Yeah.
And, yeah, and they don't really play into that they were merchants, right? And they were excellent seamen, and they were farmers. And but I think when you look at the impact of to your point, the entire world was the merchant aspect, and the sea navigation. I mean, it really, if you want to be technical about it, they probably discovered North America long before Columbus did.
Yeah.
With
I
the
read that
settlement that.
they found like Nova Scotia, New Brunswick,
Yeah,
that whole
yeah,
eastern
yeah,
Canadian seaboard,
yeah,
and it was really interesting. I was actually a day in Stockholm, and they an old merchant ship. I don't know if it was specifically Vikings, but it was from that lineage, sunk in the harbor of Stockholm, and they brought it back, and they said there's still technology or things that they did with wood building these ships that is still not being, you can't
yeah,
duplicate it today. So
yeah,
they were highly
yeah.
intelligent engineers as
Yeah,
well.
they were a lot more sophisticated than I think they're given credit for. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they actually were groomed themselves, were very cleanly, and a lot of times they would bathe every day, which is in Europe. That was back in the day, that was unheard of,
Mm-hmm.
and they found combs, and they bleached their hair. They liked they weren't blondes a lot of cases, but that blonde was perceived as being very more attractive. So they would bleach their hair. They found toothpicks. So I think they were a lot more sophisticated than
Mm-hmm.
what they get credit for. But you can't really take away from how brutal they were too,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
How were they
they
as warriors?
oh, as well as warriors. It's interesting because they were very similar to raiders, right? They were, in most cases did not, they came in and raided monasteries or villages, especially. I mean, just terrorized England. So they really really transformed England. But at first they would come over and it was easy picking, right? They'd come in and raid a monastery, or rape and pillage and
Yeah.
grab the
Not a ton of defense there.
no. And even the navigation, because I'm sailing up rivers all the way to Paris and sacking Paris. And so I think
That was in one of my
as far
episodes,
as.
by the way. That was in
Oh,
today's
okay.
history
Oh, was it? Okay.
a few weeks ago.
Okay. Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
So they were
absolutely.
they were mostly raiders, right, and marauders and all that. Now, but they did, at one point, they called it the Great Heathen Army. Invaded England as an army and took over most of England, and it was up to King Alfred the Great to stop them from taking over the entire country. But so you can't take away their ability, as warriors. They
Mm-hmm.
were, and the other thing, you talk about the steel sharks, they were heavily armored too. Almost every Viking had a metal helmet, or a helmet, or a metal helmet. Most not, the horns are really
Yeah, that
kind of
didn't really actually a
adaptation
thing.
or
Yeah, yeah.
misconception, yeah. Or they really didn't have horns, but they had metal helmets. They had the metal mail shirts, and they had
Mm-hmm.
shields. So they
Mm-hmm.
were heavily armored too. And it's interesting too when you do some research. they didn't use swords so much. They were more spears,
Spears, yep.
spears, and their shields, and then also, they were known too for a double-handled battle axe. That and the battle axe, could be used to split a shield in half, or
Right,
split
exactly.
open
It was armor piercing.
armor piercing. So that could come in play when you start discussing taking on steel covered sharks.
Right, and they were also super strong. They actually weightlifted. I was reading about their culture, and they wrestled quite a bit as like in their free time, like a leisure sport was wrestling. But they
Right.
also lifted stones
Right.
in their leisure time. So I imagine on average they were very, very strong people as well.
Strong, and even like even back when they were battling, like the Anglo-Saxons and in England, they were generally bigger,
Yeah.
larger than a lot of the other Europeans.
Mhm. And they took,
Just
it seems like it was almost like ancient Sparta, where they took like the art form of battle seriously, and they would work on their crafts. They were skilled
yeah, even
warriors.
even the women,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the women were great warriors too.
Now, from a tactic standpoint, I read about something called berserkers,
Yeah.
and oftentimes these berserkers were leading the charge. Right?
Right.
They were the ones they would send in first, and then everybody else would kind of clean up. Tell us about berserkers a little bit.
Well, berserkers a lot of times were some of the greatest warriors, but they also, looked at that, their the essence of being a berserker was actually maybe drug induced.
Yep.
That they actually practice using magic mushrooms or
Yeah, yeah,
mushrooms.
yeah,
There was
exactly.
hallucinogenic, so they'd kind of be stoned out of their heads too, right? When they attacked and didn't feel pain, like they would if they were not stoned. But so usually it was the biggest, strongest, best warriors that were out of their minds by eating mushrooms before the battle.
Okay. So this is where it gets interesting. Okay. Because if we talk about the context of this battle, right, where it's 11 on 11 on a football field, there's several questions we have to answer before we hypothesize how this battle would go. And since we're on the Vikings, let's start with the Vikings. What 11 Vikings are we talking about here? Are we talking about berserkers? Are we talking about normal soldiers, or some type of mix? Because the normal battle style would be sending in X amount of berserkers and then people following up. How are we going to do that out of these 11?
Well, to me, I don't think it would make sense if you're talking about a Viking army or group of raiders. Not all of them would be berserkers, right?
Right.
There'd just be a
But most certainly
percentage
they
that
would
were
probably would
berserkers.
be, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they would lead the charge. So I guess the first discussion is, out of the 11, how many are berserkers?
Right.
Because it would probably be, to me, maybe two or three
Okay.
are maybe the berserkers, and the other, let's say, eight are just normal Viking
Okay.
soldiers
Let's
or
go. Let's
normal
go.
Vikings.
8 normal Viking warriors and 3 berserkers.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Is
And
that
now,
Yeah, because yeah.
on the
No, go
other
ahead.
side of the ball, or other side of the field, um, steel sharks. They don't actually exist, so I don't feel like I need to be very specific on what the context of the battle is, because we even talked about submerging the field and having a meter of water, and so the sharks can swim around. We're also talking about it wasn't defined as a great white, but we're defining as a great white based on the logo. So they're about you know 4 meters long, an average male. um, so would even a meter of water even suffice? Probably not. So what we're going to do is that they are on land, but because they don't exist anyways, they move on land as if they were in water. So whatever you have to picture, whether that's like a trolley with wheels on its belly or whatever. So they move on land as if they were in water. So they're straight line fast. They cannot stop moving, right?
Right.
And they their turning radius is not great, right? Like these big great white sharks, how they normally attack is they swim up underneath their victims or their prey, right? Because they have dark tops, white bottoms, and then they come up from underneath, which they can't do in this scenario.
Right. Right.
But they miss, they swim away, and then they come back, right? They always attack in straight lines. So we're going to do it that way, where they swim fast in straight lines, but their turning radius is going to be the same that it was in water as well. Does that
Okay.
seem fair?
Yeah, and I mean, would you indicate, we indicated earlier that with the steel skin that would slow them down? Would that still, even though you're saying they're moving like they would be in water, would that still be a contributing factor to slow them down with the
Absolutely.
steel
So
skin?
it'd be
Okay.
a
Okay.
hypothesized steel shark in water, now on land, but
Okay.
with the same
Okay.
capacity of movement.
Okay.
So we have 11 Vikings, 8 normal Viking warriors, 3 berserkers, and 11 average sized great white sharks with steel skin, but they can move on land as if they're in water.
Okay.
Okay. So
That's, yeah, it's kind of interesting because I have a better idea of a berserker with, just watching one of your offensive linemen play for several years. So I
yeah,
kind of feel like I've actually seen, probably the closest thing to a real life berserker.
right. But there's no
Okay.
mushrooms, I can promise. I
No,
can
okay, no
promise there's no
mushrooms. So
mushrooms. That's
they're
good.
so they're so they're stone cold sober berserkers.
Exactly.
Okay, okay.
Exactly.
That's important.
So we kind of talked about the strategy of a steel shark or a white shark when they attack, right? It's usually from underneath, which they're not able to do here, and then a straight line, and they obviously have rows of teeth, and they get a hold of you, and then they rip, and your limbs are gone. So what do you think their strategy, if they had a strategy, would be during this fight? What are their strengths and weaknesses, you think?
Well, I mean, like you said, they're they can't come up below, right?
Right.
Like what they normally would do. They
Because they're
have,
very much
they're
surprise attack uh,
right, right, and
aggressors.
there's no surprise in this, right? They're lined up, and when the whistle blows, they're probably going to just, a straight line, their straight line speed, they're going to probably just swim directly at the Vikings.
Right. Yeah, it's much
And
like we talked about last battle where the Giants want to close space against the Rangers. I imagine
yeah,
the Sharks would want to close space as well for obvious reasons.
right,
Right.
right. And the interesting is the Vikings are kind of the same way, right? They they usually would charge into
Right.
battle, led by the berserkers. They weren't the type of military that would sit back in like a phalanx, or with the shields all, and let the
Right.
other army attack. They were attackers too, or
Yeah.
chargers. So you'd probably have, when the whistle blows, you'd probably had the 3 berserkers going full go, with all 11 sharks coming full go, and then right behind them though would be the other 8 Vikings.
Right.
I think it would probably be like a collision,
Right.
in the middle of the field.
So I have no idea how this will go. We have not spoke about this prior. So we do have 11 Vikings, 11 Sharks attacking each other. And I think it can get interesting in the discussion of how it go. But what is your first thought about how this battle would proceed?
Well, I think that my first thought is that I don't know that the Sharks would even really have the intelligence to understand the game of football, and I think they're looking at, I'm going to eat some Vikings,
Yeah,
right?
which is the
They're
goal.
they're going they're
It's
going to
on a
eat.
football field,
They're
but it doesn't.
right. So their
Yeah,
their goal is, I'm going to move as fast as I can with my steel skin, and I'm going to go start biting hunks out of the Vikings, right?
exactly.
But the interesting thing that I think, doing research on my own, is, the interesting thing is, guess what? The Vikings also ate sharks, right? In fact, they founded Iceland, and the national dish of Iceland is called hakarl. and her call is fermented or rotten shark, right? So here the thing is, you got two teams that both want to eat each other.
Well, and
right? You got
the other thing is too that the berserkers were often commonly depicted as biting their shields. Like they're so enraged and so
right,
crazy they would bite
right,
their own. So they have a
right,
taste for metal too.
right. So like I said, so this would be, unlike the last battle where the Rangers are held back and the Giants are charging, and this is both 11 on 11 just charging at him, both with the concept of I'm hungry, right? And with the Vikings, they're not going to eat the sharks right away. They'd have to kill them and let them rot, and then come back and eat them later.
I think they
guess.
oftentimes
but anyway,
bury them too.
So to me, there's this major collision, but it would start out kind of, and I imagine the berserkers are just going to probably be in the middle of the field, right? I mean, all three of them. You would imagine that the three berserkers would just charge directly the middle of the field, right? And so they would come in and hit the middle group of the sharks, where the other sharks, I think, would keep going, right? I don't think the sharks would converge all 11 on those three.
No, well, they're not pack predators usually. They're very much lone wolves.
No, they're each shark's picking out one Viking.
I would imagine
he's going for that Viking. So I got to think that the three berserkers would charge, and they would meet, at the beginning of this whole thing with a huge collision with three sharks, right? But I put my money on the berserkers.
Okay.
Because the berserkers normally have those two-handed battle axes that we've already talked about.
Right.
Can penetrate steel, can penetrate metal, can split helmets, can cut shields in half. And I think they meet the sharks and immediately take out those three sharks with their battle axes.
Okay.
That the first blows they hit, might not kill the sharks, but they're devastating blows.
Right. Probably right to the crown of the head or something.
Right.
Because that's what they were known for. Right.
Shark,
exactly.
That battle axe comes down right on that head, and it's basically that shark's taken out.
Okay.
So I think that happens in the middle. The three sharks are taken out by the three berserkers, right?
Okay.
And then I think the other sharks are going to run into, we talked about, which, like I said, there's another misperception of the Vikings. They're not there with their swords and with their shields and their swords. They've got their shields and a spear.
Right.
Right. So those spears are going to hit the sharks before the sharks get a chance to actually attack the Viking.
But the spears probably they can't thrust with enough power like the battle axe to split the steel probably. They would have to get them in the eyes or the gills or something.
Right, but it would probably slow the charge down. So like
they could kind of keep them at a distance.
Yeah, we keep them, and it would kind of slow them down, and then they'd also be able to kind of keep the shark at bay with their shields.
Mm-hmm.
So
but do you think the shark being steel and as heavy as it is and gaining a momentum of, let's say they meet after 15 yards, if they meet at the 50, I mean, that shark's going to blow through any shield and maybe not be able to bite, but just send these.
No, true. Yeah. I could see that the shark, when there's the collision, the spear maybe slows them down a little. They hit the shield and maybe knocks the Viking down.
I could imagine.
And then they would probably keep going, right? The sharks, because it's not like they're going to turn a dime. No. Momentum. They're going to keep going, knock the Vikings down, right? So the three sharks are gone. So the 8 sharks, let's say, crush through the Viking line.
Okay.
But they don't really inflict a lot of damage because of the shield and the spears.
Mm-hmm.
But now you've got all 11 Vikings behind the sharks, right? Because the sharks
swim through, and they got to turn around and come back.
Right. They got to kind of try to turn around. Meanwhile, once the berserkers took out those first 3 sharks, what did they do? They turn. I mean, they're nuts, right?
They're going after the other sharks. 8.
Yeah, they want some rotten shark soup, man. So they're going to turn around, and they're coming. They're coming too. So I think you'd have the berserkers back and the Viking, the other 8 Vikings that may perhaps been knocked down, and then you have the 3 berserkers lead another charge on 3 more sharks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then as those sharks are trying to turn around, as they're turning around, they're meeting a battle axe.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you take out 3 more sharks. So now
Now
you're
you have
down to
5 on 11.
5 on 11. And meanwhile, the other Vikings that were knocked down are up with their shields, and they've pulled out their battle axes, and they're coming. And, now they can go, there's only 5 left. They can come and somewhat start, even on the left flank and the right flank, start surrounding the sharks. Meanwhile, the 3 berserkers, they're looking for 3 more sharks. So I think between the 3 berserkers and the other 8 Vikings that have kind of surrounded the left flank and the right flank of the 5 remaining sharks, they hack them to death.
Wow.
And
I didn't expect this. I didn't expect a blowout, but it makes
yeah,
sense.
well, I think it is kind of going to be a blowout, because I think just the
lack
way
of depth,
right.
You kind of put sharks on a 2D kind of scenario, and it's very it's not advantageous for them at all.
No, and no strategy really on the sharks, right? They're just they're gonna charge straight ahead and try to eat, and in limited strategy on the Viking side, but just the tenacity of the berserkers.
Yeah, the berserkers were the big difference, and the fact that they have weapons that can penetrate armor.
Yeah,
that's a huge advantage.
Wow, so to me, I don't even know. I think you could probably have maybe some injuries, to the 8 Vikings that.
I
that
imagine
took the
them taking a charge from a steel great white is gonna. They're not gonna just pop up from that, but
right.
Severe injury probably not as well.
Not if they use the shield effectively,
right,
and they also had the spear, and I think then they would just help the berserkers just take care of the other 5 sharks that were left, that were still trying to figure out, okay, we're going to try to turn around, we're having to try to get our momentum back up to charge again. Yeah, I think it's probably going to end up being a blowout.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for the great whites is there's always the famous videos of them breaching the water, and they have a seal in their mouth or whatever. That was eliminated. That was nullified.
Yeah,
so that was
can't come from
that
below.
was their biggest tactic, and it was gone. And once these berserkers had armored piercing axes, I think it was all over.
Yeah. And actually, the steel skin was probably a detriment to them, because it slowed them down, and it wasn't enough of a defensive
not against the berserkers
advantage, with the berserkers' battle axes.
Exactly.
So they'd probably been better off if they didn't have the steel skins in this battle, because they could have maneuvered quicker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So no, I think a blowout for the Vikings.
Wow. Well, there you have it. Matchup 2 of the AFL team name Rumble goes to the Vikings. That means in this side of the bracket, you have the Giants against the Vikings in a semifinal matchup. Now that will be interesting.
That will be a battle.
I don't know. Sure. I don't know if the Berserkers will be so effective on the Giants like they were the Steel Sharks.
No, because basically the Giants, you have 11 Berserkers that are a lot larger than the Vikings Berserkers. Yeah, so it's going to.
And they're not going to be able. They're not going to be able to hit them on the crown of the head with the axe too, which was a famous move of the Berserkers. Right? They were able to.
Right.
They were historically able to one hit kill people with these battle axes, and they might be able to get a giant in the torso maybe.
Right.
But it wouldn't be
probably
the same.
Good point. They probably can't even reach the head.
No, because they were big humans, but they weren't 4 meters tall.
No, that'll be an interesting battle.
It will be. I probably enjoy this way too much. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I hope other people do it as well. Again, if you think we missed something, if you completely disagree, if you completely agree, let us know. Again, we're open-minded. These are purely hypothetical. So actually nobody's wrong. Besides if you say the Rangers beat the Giants, I just don't see that happening. But yeah, Pops, thanks again for joining. I appreciate your creativity and your expertise. And
No, it was fun, Sean.
yeah,
I enjoyed it. It's a great way to pass the time when we're all, all over the world, in sheltering in place, staying at home and trying to stay safe and healthy with the COVID-19, scenario. So,
exactly. And
uh,
if this brought a smile to your face, then it was worth it. And if it pissed you off, it was also worth it. I got mad the other day at what was Friday's episode? On Bill O'Brien, at Mike Gundy, and at David Carr. And it felt good. It actually felt good to get mad too. So any range of emotion is good during this time.
well, I think we're making a mistake of calling it in over, and I don't know if it's the same over there, in Austria, but over here we're calling it social distancing, or
Mm,
and I don't think we it's physical distancing, right? we're,
right.
we're physically, but we need to maintain our social, relationships, and
Absolutely. For sanity
and
reasons.
there's no reason to not be social, right, and
No,
sociable and maintain your friendships and all that. There's too many ways of doing that. So I think we need to practice physical distancing, but not social.
absolutely. Absolutely. And until next time for us, next matchup is gonna be Raiders versus the Panthers. So I have
Okay.
no hunch. We're going to try to be as unbiased as possible. It'll be a legitimate battle. So that if the Raiders lose in the first round, they lose in the first round. Um,
Yeah, we're not biased at all.
no, absolutely not biased.
No,
No bias.
no,
No
totally,
bias
no,
at
totally objective.
all.
Yeah,
As objective. I
no,
mean, we take this dead
yeah,
serious and we're professionals. So
yeah,
absolutely no
that's
bias.
right.
So,
Absolutely.
Pops, thanks again. See you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. It was fun.
Of course.
Okay. Bye bye.